All right. So the first question I wanted to ask is something that you've probably been asked before because I know I've been asked it, but where were you on September 11th? How old were you and what setting were you in?
Mhm. On 9/11, I was 23 years old. I was on board the USS Bunker Hill. I was in the wardroom, which is where the officers take their meals, and generally sort of it's something of a living room meets dining room. It's a communal space on board ships for the officers on board. And I remember finishing breakfast, sitting around talking about plans for the day, laughing. I can distinctly remember some of my shipmates that I was talking with, and then we had the news on in the background, and quickly people brought attention to the fact that one of the towers had been hit, and it became a pretty surreal day for lots of reasons. We were in port. We were did not have deployment plans. I think our next deployment was sort of scheduled for a year and a half out, maybe 2 years out. And we all kind of gathered in the wardroom to watch current events unfold. Obviously, which is, I think, most of our experience, unless you were actually in New York, then you probably had a different experience. But we observed the news, saw the first tower fall, second tower get hit, second tower fall, and then everything that sort of followed after that became a little bit of a blur. But pre 9/11 for me in the Navy was such a different experience than post 9/11 Navy, and we didn't understand at the time just the gravity of what that meant. Although we knew that this had been a terrorist event, we knew that there were going to be implications, national security implications, and we knew that that the nation was a different place. I don't know that we understood fully what the implications were for us in that moment. Now, quickly, what happened was we were activated for coastal defense. So there was we were attached to Third Fleet at the time. So the USS Bunker Hill is part of Third Fleet, Pacific Fleet, and quickly, I don't know if it was that day or the next day. I think it was that day. And again, it kind of became a blur. But we sortied. We got underway. We left port. So the concern was like, what's the magnitude of this? Is this another Pearl Harbor? Are there more attacks planned? And so ship's safest place to be is at sea versus in port. And so we went to sea, and then we're given orders to go do coastal defense, where basically Pacific ships with anti-air capability, which guided missile cruisers have, were deployed off the coast of various cities of the United States. So ships were deployed to do coastal defense for Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle, kind of up the western coast. And we went and did an anti-air sort of defense mission in support of, I believe it was Seattle. So looking at air contacts rolling in and around, obviously all commercial aircraft have been grounded. So at that point, you're looking for any aircraft activity, and at that point it's presumed to be suspicious because of the fact that commercial air travel had been suspended. And so we were underway doing that mission with our Aegis radar systems and anti-air capability, which is the primary mission of a ship like ours, and all the other guided missile cruisers and destroyers that were part of the San Diego or Pacific Fleet were out underway doing the same thing. We did that for a period of time until it was determined that this had been an isolated incident and commercial air travel resumed. And we came back to San Diego, came back to port. And then what unfolded was then an accelerated schedule of events. Obviously, President Bush was our commander-in-chief at the time, and we declared war. I mean, it was a attack, obviously, and I'm going to begin to replay things that people have their own kind of memory of, and I'm not the historian of record for what happened next. But obviously, there was decisions to go to war, take action against ISIS, seek Osama bin Laden, and ultimately conflicts that brought us to Iraq and Afghanistan. And so the implication for us was that we began to get into a planning posture to go underway and do a deployment in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And so that's what the mission became. So what was going to be a deployment that was going to be 6 months out, or that was going to be 6 months in duration, but about a year and a half out, became accelerated. And we were on deployment, I think, within probably 5 months of 9/11, maybe 6 months of 9/11, and ended up doing an extended deployment. So we ended up being in the Persian Gulf for, I think it was about 9 months, 8-9 months. And the conditions of that deployment, you have to understand, when you're in the Navy, pre-9/11 Navy is, you look forward to deployment because you go and you visit tons of foreign ports. You go to Australia, you go to Singapore, you go to, you really get a chance to see the world. I mean, the cliche of join the Navy, see the world, it was true. In the security environment post 9/11, that was not true. We did not do port visits. If we did them, they were extremely brief, a day or two in nature, because we were very concerned about the terrorist threat and the security environment. And so when you deployed, you really just deployed. I mean, you were on board. Ships can be self-sustaining. You don't need to go into port. You can get food and fuel at sea. All the things that you need can happen because of the logistics and supply chains that the Navy has established at sea. And so we were off the coast of Qasur, which is a southern port town in Iraq, on board the USS Bunker Hill. And that's where we were stationed when we commenced operations in engagement in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Our mission was to shoot Tomahawk missiles against strategic targets that were identified, presidential sites and so forth in and around Iraq. And so we shot a number of missiles in support of that mission, which is sort of tip of the spear action for what the Navy does. And then we were doing anti-air defense as a remainder of our mission. So we did that for about 9 months, came back to port, eventually to San Diego. I got back in about 2003, and then life resumed. Then I got out of the Navy in 2004.
All right. How did that change, or did it change your relationship with the people you served with, and then also the veteran community afterward?
Mm-hmm. Everything changed for us as Americans. I think I would first and foremost say my experience as an American changed, and that was true for lots of Americans. I think my experience as a service member was amplified. And if you're in the military, you're training for combat defense. I mean, so there were people with whom I served that had been in the Navy for 20 years and had not seen combat action. And this was, you never want to go to war, but this was in some ways the capstone of their careers, that they were actually going to sort of do in wartime action, the things that they had spent 20 plus years training for. And so for me, it was a little bit of a different experience to have had that richness of an experience inside of the 4 years that I served. And if anything, it just fortified what were already really strong bonds that I had established with the people with whom I had served. Mm-hmm. That was going to be true no matter what. I mean, the bonds I had established with them pre 9/11 were incredibly strong. I was so grateful for the experience. I was already really inspired by everyday Americans that step up and raise their hand and choose to serve and take the oath. And that was there to begin with, and it was only amplified through seeing events unfold after 9/11. I think for me, having been in the Navy, that's a different experience than being on the ground in Afghanistan, than being on the ground in Iraq. It's stressful, but it's different. I didn't feel sort of sense of imminent personal danger. What's frankly hard about it is the monotony of extended shifts. I was working for about a month and a half of that stretch in what they call port starboard, where there was me and a senior chief watchstander who were the only ones on board qualified to stand a certain anti-air, kind of like an air threat watch. And we would go 6 hours on watch, 6 hours off watch, 6 hours on, and that schedule of 6 on, 6 off, 6 on, 6 off, I mean, where you can't really tell the difference between day and night, that kind of thing becomes incredibly challenging. Day after day, week after week. And so, but that's a different kind of challenge than being on the ground and being in close combat. So, but I will say this too, when you get out of the military, and I don't know how much this was amplified because of what we were doing post 9/11, but when you have been in such a mission-driven environment, when you've been stretched to your personal capacity, when you've been surrounded by people with whom you have this deep love and affection, and with whom there is this implicit sense of trust and implicit sense of camaraderie, not to mention silliness and stupidity and the things that give you lots of joy. It's not just sort of heavy, serious patriotism. It's a lot of just the frivolity of being with the same people on board a ship, all of whom are characters for 9 months. You get to know people, 380 people, 60 people on board, closer than, the litany of friends that you accumulated throughout college. I mean, in some cases. And so that is such a gift. And I think for me, getting out of the military, what I felt was sort of this duality of, I miss the intensity of and the joy that comes from being alongside people that have a shared sense of mission. That life outside is just not that interesting. It doesn't your adrenaline, your adrenal system, like being in the company of people that you have this intensity of an experience and this shared appreciation for and an important mission for, that for which you're serving. So that you miss that, frankly, when you get out, and that everyday life in America is safe, joyous, abundant, but you're missing a piece of that challenge, and you're missing a sense of that mission, and you're missing that sense of camaraderie within people, where you share that mission. So those are things getting out. And so I think, honestly, part of what I was feeling post 9/11 and then post my own service was just a selfish desire for my own need, for my own well-being, for my own mental health and emotional health. Was like, I've got to get back to a mission. I've got to get back into company with people that who also have that desire for camaraderie towards a mission. And that really, those conditions, I think so many veterans feel getting out of the military, that they just want that sense of mission back. They want that community back. They're not sure how to make that translation into a civilian environment. I don't think it's as much about the economic scarcity and fear. It's not just about a job. It's that sense of belonging. It's that sense of mission that I think we're really seeking when we get out of the military. And certainly I was, and that was very much, I think, the precondition for Bunker Labs.
And, as you were thinking about that mission and that desire for camaraderie and to be back with people who had served, what drew you specifically to curating that group of entrepreneurs who had that common veteran experience?
Mm-hmm. Well, it was really born out of my own lived experience. When I got out of the military, and I went through my own sort of transition process, right? Got my MBA, got a job, kind of cleaned up life, paid off some bills, got what I described as like settled, like on the other side of the experience, and settled and stable, and felt in a really good place. Met also, the guy that would become my husband someday. And so just like life, just lived life. And that's a process to get out of the military and transition. Is to sort of land and feel like, okay, I'm on my feet on the other side of that. And that takes a minute for everyone. I don't care, what your experience has been. That takes a minute. But when you get there, then you begin to look around and say, okay, now what? And for me, a lot of the sort of civilian defined dreams that have been laid out, particularly coming out of an MBA program, like, management consulting or investment banking, or, any variety of paths that are available. I explored a few of them, and I realized pretty quickly, like, this doesn't fulfill me. It doesn't fulfill me. I think that's just the only way I can say it. I'm grateful. I don't want to interpret that as like a flippant arrogance. It's like, no, I'm really grateful to have a job, and it's actually kind of an interesting job, and it's a good job. There's nothing explicitly wrong on it. If you were looking at my life, you're like, he's got a good life. There's nothing wrong with it. And there wasn't, but internally, I would tell you, I didn't feel a sense of fulfillment. And so that led me to pursue starting my own business. And the hygienics of that, salary, stability, et cetera, all got worse, but the fulfillment factor went way up. And I felt like I was sort of on a path to pursuing things that mattered to me, including starting a business, including running for office, including getting involved in public sector things that I cared deeply about, causes that I cared about. And I just felt like I was able to step a little bit more into my identity and my purpose that really mattered to me. And so, started my own business, ran for office, did some things, took a job in the public sector, started another business, and was really finding fulfillment with that. And I was having a conversation with someone that worked, a non-veteran that worked at the big incubator in Chicago at 1871. And I said, I've had such a great experience starting my own business. We're having some success. It's a lot of fun. And I asked him, I said, do you see a lot of veterans coming through your doors at 1871 looking for support? I mean, is there a community of folks out there? Because the veteran community is something that I've just always cared deeply about. It's where I find the most joy, frankly. Again, a selfish instinct of just, I like working with veterans. They're more fun. They get it done. They get it done faster, better, and they do it with more fun, which I just find fulfilling. And he said, it's an interesting idea. I don't know, but there probably is are some coming through. And I said, this could be an opportunity to really pull some other folks together. Anecdotally, individually, was talking to veterans who are also starting their own businesses. I had thought about sort of turning that into something, but I saw an opportunity to maybe create a support system for veterans specifically. And so we built this partnership in 1871. We announced that we were going to help veterans start businesses, and that was the genesis of what came together. It actually got announced at a luncheon, at the Pat Tillman Foundation luncheon, in I think it was November of maybe, 2013. Mayor Emanuel was speaking, and he announced that, hey, there's going to be a new initiative at 1871 called The Bunker, and that was sort of the beginning of it. And really, my entering thought was, I don't have a strong point of view about what the programming looks like. I do have a strong point of view that we've got to help military veterans and military spouses and military community. We've got to speak to this fulfillment piece. And how do you address fulfillment? Honor their dreams, be willing to co-author them, and then give them a good community. And if we can create that community, then the programming will speak for itself. And that's what we did. We just started meeting up once a week. We called it the Brain Trust. We get together at 9 a.m. I get donuts, and we talk about our businesses and what we're trying to do, and find ways to help each other. It's just super simple and super valuable. And that started in Chicago, and pretty quickly, I would say almost immediately, we had veterans in other cities say, hey, this is cool, we should do this over here. Or, hey, we're doing this thing in Washington, D.C. It's similar, but different. Maybe we should partner. And all those conversations started to unfold, and very quickly we became sort of a national organization, a federation. We had articles of what do we call them in the United States? The Articles of Confederation, before we had a constitution. And we were a confederated kind of network of leaders in different cities who were creating their own bunker. And we'd give them the logo files, we'd say, hey, don't screw it up. And, off you go. And we were kind of a loose ragtag network of folks just trying to do this, put it together. And in time, it got more sophisticated. And that's how new businesses always go. It always looks a little unsophisticated, a little sloppy, a little not totally put together, but that's actually not wrong, because that gives you the flexibility to figure out exactly what it needs to be. You have to discover what the need is. You don't just decide what the need is. You have to discover that. And so we launched it. We had other folks launch other chapters in other cities. We had our first convening, which was just leaders from around the country coming together, sitting around, and us on the whiteboard saying, hey, what's working, what's not? What do we need to agree that we all do the same? What are we going to agree to hold loose? And it scaled from there. And eventually, with time and with scale, I think when we got to like 13 chapters around the country. We really saw the need to strategically nationalize the platform, create more of an alignment across what we were doing across all the chapters, saw the need, strategic, frankly, and all of this was approached from the standpoint of like, what's most helpful for the community that we're trying to serve, right? And if it's to allow local autonomy, then have local autonomy. If it's to have national standards and capacity and approach, then nationalize it. So that was sort of the thought process. And we went through a process of nationalizing a number of our functions, including fundraising, marketing, brand, culture, retreats, and then kept a lot of things localized. And today, Bunker Labs is special. We do our best work. We are special. We are valuable when we hold true those values of like honoring dreams of the people that we have the privilege of interacting with, just meeting them where they're at, telling them that their dreams matter, honoring that they have a desire to seek greater fulfillment, meeting them halfway, co-authoring that, co-signing on that, and then giving them a community that loves them and will hold them up and hold them accountable. Both. That's what community does. That's what friendship is. And so we are at our best when we do that, and we continue to be a community among other things. That's our primary mission, is just to be that place where people can show up and find that support.
Absolutely. One thing I've been thinking about is that there's a statistic that we often refer to. There was a study done by the Institute for Veterans and Military Families out of Syracuse in conjunction with Bunker Labs, and it cites that after World War II, about 49% of veterans returning from service started businesses, whereas the rate of post 9/11 veterans doing the same has fallen to 5.6%. And I'm curious, why do you think, or have you found specific reasons why the post 9/11 veterans have such a different relationship with entrepreneurship or business ownership than veterans in the past?
Mm-hmm. I have a lot to say on this, and we won't have time to say it all now. But there's a lot at play. Number one, part of this is demographic trend, which is that the most entrepreneurial cohort in America today is those 50 and older. So as people get older, they actually get better at starting businesses. And I think some of that will be true for our generation, that once they have stabilized themselves and maybe hit a point of maturity, maybe the kids are in college, maybe that's when they decide to start their own business and step out on their own. So there's a demographic factor to this. I think the bigger thing though is we had mandatory service during World War II. And what it did was it created a very powerful cultural construct for us as a country, where we all felt connected in ways that we didn't feel connected before. And if you look at Israel, that is a country that has mandatory military service, and it's a smaller country. It's a different country. I get all that. The comparisons aren't perfect, but part of what they have as a country is this extraordinary entrepreneurial activity. I mean, they are themselves sort of, as a country, a unicorn in terms of the number of new startups, the extent to which those companies are find venture capital backing, the success of those companies. And the social currency of that country is military service. That's the through line by which deals get done. That's the through line by which networks get created. In this country, it's usually where you went to college. That's the first question. Where did you go to college? And that's kind of how social currency gets created. But that leaves a lot of people out. If the social currency is where you went to college, or if the social currency is which Y Combinator cohort were you in, we're going to leave a lot of people out. If the social currency is where did you serve, I can meet someone that was prior enlisted in the Air Force, and even though we had a radically different experience, there's something that is shared amongst us that I choose to see as relatability. I choose to see them with a certain amount of kinship. And after World War II, that sense of kinship was really high. That sense of community was extraordinarily strong. And people would, return home and go to places like, the VFW. And there was a whole fraternal and social construct of community-based membership. There was people belonged to churches, they belonged to VFW halls. We don't have that same infrastructure today. It looks really different. So you had strong social infrastructure, kind of community-based organizations and community-based, faith-based, people belong to churches and things like that at rates at which they don't today. You had strong relatability that was through shared national service, strong levels of national trust, and this social fabric that cut across. And all of that created the preconditions for strong entrepreneurial activity. And so you had other things at play too. You had more economic sort of engagement within a community, where someone who didn't have a lot of economic resources might know someone that did have a lot of economic resources. We don't see that enough today in public life and civil society. And so I really think if you ask me what's the difference, it's not about why are these veterans different. It's really the macro conditions of our society, of community-based membership, organizations, community-based belonging, people having networks that are diverse, that include people that are high net worth, that include people that are first generation college attendees, that include people that are have served in the military. I think with Bunker Labs, we are kind of chasing that opportunity to create that social ecosystem, at least amongst the military community, because that community is large, it's diverse. It includes people that are in the C-suite at the Fortune 500. It includes venture capitalists. It includes people that, are classified as essential workers. It includes people that have ideas. So if we can create that social system amongst ourselves, then we will create that opportunity, that diverse and strong network capacity for military veterans and military spouses that want to start their own businesses. And I think my hope is that we do that well, and the non-veteran military connected community looks at that with some envy and says, man, they actually have figured out how to create that social currency in ways that we have not. But there's a number of threads in that, but I think that is a big part of why Israel is so successful. It's that social trust that is manifest and then referenced through military service that transcends. And that's really why I'm such an advocate. I don't think that we should have all Americans serve in the military, but I do think that we need some form of nationalized service that creates a through line for our own identities and for our own networks that we can, kind of go through life and be successful, but that we can still point back to. And there's something really a sort of a dark void in America today where we don't have that shared touchstone in any form. And I think it's really dangerous, and it's dangerous for lots of reasons, not the least of which is the fact that I think it inhibits entrepreneurial activity, which people wouldn't necessarily see a through line to those things, but I see a very direct plumb line between these sort of societal trends and the lack of entrepreneurial activity.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And Israel is an interesting example. I've always read about them as a model of innovation, that sort of like just the number of deals that get done. I never thought about that common through line. And I mean, when you're talking about the social connectivity and the fabric of American life, I feel like now more than ever, it feels very fragmented and very, very weak. So
very much so.
Makes a lot of sense. One other question, you referred to this a little bit about, enjoying working with veterans and why veterans are special to you. But how would you characterize, a veteran entrepreneur? What makes a veteran entrepreneur unique? How do they stand out from, not necessarily like trying to rank people, but just how do they stand out from civilian entrepreneurs?
Mm-hmm. Well, our community is a diverse community, and we have some, like America, we got some rock stars, we got some turds. If I can say turd, but we are a diverse community. And so I would not give sort of like a monolithic assignment, but I think that there are, I would offer a couple broad, not universally true characterizations, but the biggest one is this. It's simply that running a startup is much more about operational discipline than it is about brilliant ideas. And somewhere along the way, this message got away from us that, entrepreneurs are, if you ask people, what's an entrepreneur? People say like, it's someone who's visionary, it's someone who's a risk taker. I think vision and risk taking are like I don't want to say they're irrelevant, but they are the lagging indicators of successful entrepreneurship. Successful entrepreneurship is people that hustle, are consistent, have incredible discipline, and frankly have good operational kind of management skills. You know, it's like it's people that sort of show up on time, develop a coherent work plan. They don't let their egos get in the way of people saying, but why are you doing it that way? That doesn't make sense. They have a willingness to sort of just put themselves out there and get the feedback because they understand that that's the process by which you get better. They are not insecure, sort of brilliant but fragile idea people. I think the ones that I see just being successful, they just have this dogged perseverance, and they are very disciplined. If they say that they're going to do something, they do it. They stay focused. You know, I think a lot of folks that are pursuing ideas can get distracted and then they kind of flame out because they're all over the map. And so I think it's really about these just core tenets of discipline, working hard, staying focused, being willing to take feedback. And, you know, a lot of that to me points to business maturity. And I think that this is also what distinguishes military veterans in the workforce. You know, what is true, so as a class of people, I don't think that there's anything sort of magical about military veterans, but what is shared and what is true is they have all, if they've been in military service for some time, they've all worked in a disciplined environment where they understand professionalism, they understand like you show up on time, which like, that's a simple thing, but it's amazing in civilian life how many people just get that wrong, right? So they just understand and like what an environment committed to excellence looks like. Show up on time, be respectful, be professional, do what you say you're going to do. You know, have a plan, work the plan, get the plan done. You know, just like these sort of very simple business fundamentals that I think I have honestly seen in non kind of military circles, that those fundamental things can just get away from people. They don't actually understand how to run a tight meeting. They don't understand that you actually need to have a meeting, that, you know, that there's like decisions that need to get made, that there's a leadership responsibility, there's a management responsibility. So I think it's all of those very fundamental things that make them good operators, which I think is the core ingredient to being a good entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. That definitely resonates with me and my experience of watching who's succeeded. You know, like you said, not the brilliant but fragile idea people necessarily, but just that dogged commitment and running a tight ship. I know my dad is a veteran, and he ran our entire household like that for the rest of, you know, my entire life. And to this day, I think I've inherited some of that. I know the bunker community includes many military family members as well. And there's sort of, it's a spillover effect perhaps, where everybody involved with somebody who served begins to adopt those same behaviors.
Yes, they do. Whether we like it or not, it's really ingrained. And it sticks with you, and I think it probably does sort of bleed into the household, and you know, Rachel, carry a piece of that with you. So absolutely, yeah, we're a community of people. You know, and I think we're also a community of people culturally. This is also true of having been in the military. Culturally, you really understand what it means to work hard, stay focused, get the mission done, and then you know what it means to have fun and be able to take some jokes at your own expense and see and love people that look different from you, that come from very different experiences. And that is all really valuable too when it comes to building a diverse team. But you have to have a diverse team to be successful ultimately with your business. And again, these are things that I think just come really naturally to the military community. They've been part of that in you know, kind of those kinds of environments in their prior service life, and it's really just who we are, and that carries forward in when you start your own business.
Absolutely. I have one more question prepared that I wanted to ask, you know, just as we think about why we're having this conversation. We're approaching 20 years after 9/11, you know, and it's a particularly weighty anniversary, both because of, you know, the 20 years mark, but also with everything that's been happening in recent weeks with Afghanistan, the troop withdrawal, the violence that's ensued, and, you know, not necessarily thinking about entrepreneurship at this point, but do you have any sort of thoughts or words of solidarity or messages to those who have served in Afghanistan for the past few decades, or in this very recent withdrawal period, and to the many Afghan people who've risked their lives to assist American troops?
Mm-hmm. Well, the recent events are devastating. And I know, like just about all the veterans I know, I'm looking for ways to personally support our Afghan friends and allies, as well as our service members, you know, through a number of ways. And I think that we all have to be asking ourselves that question right now, like, what can we personally do to help? And there's ways in which we can help, and we need to. I think the bigger question and leadership lesson for military service members and the folks that support them is really this. And actually, this is, I think, a question for citizens of our country, which is, you know, did we do our duty? And I think this is the question I'm asking myself, and I try to ask myself in every phase of life, which is, did I do my duty? And I think a lot of people approach the question of leadership from the standpoint of, what do I want next? You know, what can I do next? It's sort of like a self-centered question. And I think that's not wrong, but I think a lot of military veterans approach this question of leadership from a place of duty. And what I would say is, like, you did your duty when you, at the age of 18, decided to join the military or join, you know, like an officer training program. You did your duty when you were on deployment and overseas, and some people gave more than simply their duty. You came home, and the question is sort of like, what's your duty today? And in some cases, your duty is like, and I think this is actually the crux of entrepreneurship too, is like, you see a problem, and so you see that you are potentially in a position to do something at the problem. Well, then you have a duty. If you view entrepreneurship as a duty towards ideas, that this is an idea that I have uniquely, I hold it, I see what it can do for others, then you have a duty to bring that to life. And that's, again, sort of entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship as an ego pursuit is the wrong place. Entrepreneurship as a duty is the right place. And we have a duty to do today, military veterans and military family members. We have a unique duty to do today. The country is reeling. We're being pushed to the edge of our outrage with our political leadership, with our partisan and toxic system. We understand that democracy is a fragile experiment. And so I would look to the community of people that have already done their duty in one phase of their life and say, you have another duty to do today. And that duty can be as simple as role modeling a better conversation. It can be role modeling and bringing empathy for people that those around you would rather hate, and you actually elevating and saying, but let's try to lead with love. I think the duty can be to try to heal political divides. The duty can be to run for office. And so there's going to be a lot of duty and obligation that the post 9/11 generation of veterans that Marjorie Eastman calls the frontline generation. I think that their contributions are only just beginning. And I would just say, thank you for what you've done. And your most important contributions are probably for what comes next.
Right. Thank you so much, Todd. It's been really wonderful speaking with you.
You as well, Rachel. Thanks for this time. I just really enjoyed it, as always.
Well, I'm going to stop the recording now. Just to pause.